Call to order WTA Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, September 19th, 2024. Let's start with roll call.
All right, Jonathan.
Do you want to come up?
Oh, new mics are going to work. So,
Are they connected?
everybody
No.
okay.
We have new microphones up, so we're testing those to see how they work. Nobody appears to be.
All right, Donovan,
Here.
Hawkinson,
Here.
Cortez,
Here.
and Jen Lautenbach is on her way. Rosequist,
Yes.
Sadu,
Here.
Stewart,
She's here.
and William,
Here.
Darwin, and do we have Mary Lynn?
Maryland is here.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Item C, citizen communications. Is there anyone who would like to unmute and speak to the board? I'm not seeing anyone in person. You're allowed up to 3 minutes. Going once. Doesn't look like it. All right, moving right along. Item D, we're going to go into closed session. The board will now meet in closed session for an arbitration update as allowed by RCW 42.30.140(4)B. The board will be in closed session for approximately 10 minutes until 8:12 a.m. The board is not expected to take any action on this matter following the closed session. All right. Moving right along. Item E, board action, consideration of approval of a 2024 budget amendment.
All right, that's me. Thank you all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I think Rochelle's going to display some things for me. And speaking of financial impact, we're going to look at asking the board for approval for an amendment to both the 24 operating and capital budgets. And this is coming from a number of sources, but there are significant changes that we wanted to be able to adjust the budget to. There's some detail on page 1 and 2 that I'll summarize, and then page 3 has the meat of it. But essentially, we're seeing sales tax revenue come in still at about $3.5 million per month, but it is below what our expectation was. So with the projection to the end of the year, with seasonality and trending built in, we're looking at being about $4 million under budget. So that's one big component of the adjustment. And most of that, about 3/4 of that, is offset by the Move Ahead Washington funds that we drew down early. So the state is on a fiscal year from July 1 to June 30. So we were able to draw Q1 and Q2 of next year's money into this year. And we were advised to do that just with the election pending, or excuse me, the vote pending on the CCA. And then within the operating and capital expenses, we had some things we needed to shift around in categories. We had buses that cost a little bit more than we anticipated, so we increased grant revenue for that. So there are a few moving parts. The net of this, Rochelle, if you could go to page 3 of that memo, please, is an expectation of about $300,000 increase to revenue with all of these components. Of course, that's if everything happens exactly the way that we're planning right in this amendment. But given the vote on the CCA and just sort of the volatility of things right now, we wanted to get the budget in a more accurate place to provide some transparency for the board. There's a whole lot of detail behind these numbers. If you're interested in seeing those, I can provide it. But there's the before and after picture. But essentially, it is just cleaning up the budget, getting it into a more accurate representation so we can be in a good position for 25. I'll ask you to approve this, and then next month we'll start looking at the 25 budget. There is one caveat. The property purchase budget allocation is still in 24, and it will likely be in 25 also. At this point, we're not sure if we could close on that property in 24. So it may be in both places unless we get enough information before the board approves the budget. So there's $5 million in 24. If that isn't spent in 24, our cash position going into 25 will change. I just don't have enough certainty on that piece yet. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on this. If not, I'll let you guys discuss and potentially vote.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah,
And
so
then Todd.
Shonda, this is great. I'm glad we're updating things to give an accurate picture, and the numbers look good, but they only look good because we've got 2025 revenue here, right?
That, yes, correct. That move ahead
And so
Washington
that's
money.
a worry, isn't it?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
It seems like it's a worry. So it sort of is papering over the flat sales tax revenue. And so the reality is still we have flat sales tax revenue. And the reality is next year is going to look bad by exactly the amount of paper that we papered over.
That's true. That's true. So we could have not drawn those funds and you'd see the whole 4 million in sales tax, and then it would be offset by what we receive in 26. So it really is moving it just between the 2 years. We didn't do that just to offset the sales tax. It was advised to pull those funds before the November election.
No, I understand. It was the right move.
But you're correct.
For the board's awareness, I think we realize there's still actually a hole hidden in the budget.
Correct. One other thing we're planning on doing, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayland, I see your hand up, is we're convening a team to start brainstorming on new ideas to generate revenue. So instead of just looking at sales tax, fares, what other things are other agencies doing? What can we brainstorm on ways to increase and have another steady permanent revenue stream that starts next week, I believe. So I'll be excited to bring you along on that as we go on that journey to identify some additional things. But we do have a gap, and it's not just us. And we're seeing that with all of the agencies.
And that's the revenue side's in addition to the expense side that we always do, but we just hadn't been looking on the other side of the ledger. So we're trying to look at that as well.
Todd, did you have something?
Yeah, maybe sort of the same question as Michael, but I would understand this maybe less. Like, so where is this actually coming from? It's from fund balances or?
No. So let me back up. If we hadn't drawn the move ahead Washington money, those first 2 quarters, yes, that difference would be coming from our fund balance. So right now, since we were able to kind of match those funds and move some things around, that extra 300,000 in essence would add to the fund balance. So if things stayed the same in 26 and we still had that decline in sales tax revenue, you would see it come from the fund balance.
Okay, I think I get it.
Mayor Lund?
Well, I think Les spoke to this a little bit, but it still feels pretty not fleshed out. I mean, I think I can speak for Executive Sadhu and myself when we've been living in a world of looking at reductions on expenses. We do not anticipate that the sales tax environment is going to improve in 2025. And so the fact that we've taken the first 2 quarters of a fund for 2025 to paper over for this year on the revenue side, I just want to make sure that we're also looking at the expenditure side, because I don't think there's many folks that feel much more optimistic about the coming year and revenues course correcting. So
we are currently working on the 25 budget also, pardon me, and we're looking at this year-end forecast. So the number that this 4 million is coming from, pardon me. And right now we have a 2% increase in that. So our forecasted sales tax or budgeted for 25 is below $40 million. And then we are also taking a look at our expenditure side, looking at initiatives that have been proposed to include in the budget and saying yes or no. That work will continue next week as we have another visit for the 25 budget on the 24th of September. So we are working on both sides of that and looking at how much of our reserves are we comfortable spending? What do we want to have to roll over in future years to do large projects? So we're trying to balance all of those pieces and not completely spend down our reserves, but also not sit on a lot of money for all of the years going forward. And that's been a challenge for us over the years. We have a lot of cash and the board's asked us to spend it down. And sort of those worlds are colliding now on how much do we spend it down by? And those will be conversations we'll be asking the board on October 3rd when we present sort of our budget principles and our themes of the budget and how we want to try to address this potential gap.
Can I ask a
That's all?
question? Can I ask a follow-up question?
Certainly.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the presentation of the budget? As a new member, I don't know what that's historically looked like, but does that typically take place in a regular board meeting? Do we do a multi-hour kind of focused conversation on the board?
We've done it both ways. So this year there'll be an introduction on the 3rd, which will just be high level. Then the 17th will be a full presentation, including assumptions, numbers, what we expect the fund balance to look like. I'll work on a 5-year projection. We have occasionally done retreats on the budget. We don't have one planned for this year. We have some multi-day work planned for next year. So it's not necessarily consistent on that, but we are looking to have a multi-day strategic planning session next year on this. And then some of the strategic sessions the rest of this year will help us lead into that larger conversation.
Mayor, for your question, we have the 3rd and 17th in October, and then the 7th and 21st of November as well to talk about. So it's multiple sessions throughout the next couple months.
Thank you.
And we are watching the vote. So the vote on the CCA is the 5th of November. So we've got our eyes on that. We have a meeting November 7th. Not quite sure what that will look like, right? If the CCA is repealed, we may have to pivot rather quickly for that meeting.
So just for background, the CCA is the Climate Commitment Act. It's subject to Initiative 2117. We get on an annual basis about 3.3 million from Move Ahead Washington for operating, and we get close to about 1.5 for special needs or paratransit. If I-2117 were to pass, just factually, not politically, just if that passes, that money would go away, which is part of the reason drawing forward from next year. And then we would have to figure out how we were going to cut the budget significantly to cover those costs. So what would probably happen is if the election's on the 5th, we're supposed to talk with the board on the 7th of November. If it passes on the 5th, we may push off the 7th discussion while we take a first pass at what that would look like, and then come back on the 21st, and then probably seek approval on the 5th, subject to further budget discussions into next year.
Okay, Staff Paul, for real this time.
Yeah, I wanted to know, Shonda, that if there was no situation of this 2117, would you still have done this?
I would have still proposed it for the large decline in the sales tax. Just so I want to avoid a situation where the board is seeing numbers that we don't anticipate will come through at the end of the year. So our end of the year position is a lot different. And the 4 million is significant enough. I felt that was important to do. If it had been maybe 1 million or something around that number, we might have just done an information note to the board, but I felt this was large enough.
Yeah. So would you actually spend the $4 million in this 2020 next 3 months, or it is paper over exercise so that your budget looks that you have money? Like, is there real expenses coming up for that shortage on capital side?
There are real expenses coming up. So my anticipation, if we hadn't offset with some of that Move Ahead Washington, we would have had quite a larger decline from the fund balance. With this changes, it should be fairly close to a net.
So I'll point out that on this year, we budgeted differently. In the past, we had budgeted 100% of our employees for all 12 months, which wasn't realistic. This year, we tried to take a better idea of what that actually would look like. So that changed some of the budget numbers on that. And then executing on capital, Andy and Devin and the team have done a really good job on executing that, including a large number of buses that have come in this year, partially because of supply chain issues that should have come in before that are all rolling in now. So there's a number of factors that are going into that to create the need for this action and the need for those real expenses that are coming. The other thing I'll say is FTA is very slow on reimbursements from our grants for those buses. And so we may have to cash flow these buses to the tune of $20 million while we're waiting for that to come in. That should come in by the end of the year, but we don't know. So all those factors were all converging together, that plus the advice we got on the Climate Commitment Act dollars, and so felt this was the best course going forward for this year to recommend to the board.
Michael?
Under state law, what actions and options are available to WTA with regard to taking a position on the impacts of 2117, or just informing the public on the impacts of 2117? I know that, for example, the city council, we are allowed one action only to take a resolution for or against ballot measures. I know that if the sponsoring jurisdiction puts out a measure, they're still allowed to give out information to the public, but not take a position. It might be prudent to let the community know what the impacts are.
So we're working on pulling together what the impacts would be in a factual way, not in a political positional way, that we'll bring to the board as part of these discussions, and we'll publish on our website and so forth on that. It has been the subject of one Cascadia Daily News article on the impacts, and then we'll have that one page or two that we'll be able to educate. We'll have to get back to you on if this board can pass a resolution on it or not. I'm not sure. I know you individually as elected officials have the authority to take positions, but I'm not sure on the WTA resolution. So I'll check in with
So putting together a one-pager is nice, and putting a website is also nice, but my guess is that really won't get out to the public. And if we do have sound information that local voters need to hear, I'm thinking we need to be a little bit more proactive about putting information out in a timely manner in early October, when they could actually inform voters.
Okay. I'll find out on what the authority is here with Mark and get back to you. And we'll shoot for October 3rd if we can do that.
Mayor Lund?
I'm prepared to support this budget amendment as presented, but I just want to say I'll be really eager to better understand as a board member both the revenue and expenditure side of what we're looking at for 2025.
Okay, further discussion or questions? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve this 2024 budget amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. Item
you.
F is the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments, concerns? Dan? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes as well.
Real quick.
Sure.
All right. I just wanted to let everyone, since we were talking about 2117, our local union is meeting with other unions throughout the state of Washington tomorrow, and we will also be putting out a information packet and probably doing a lot more proactive work. So you will probably see more stuff coming on that. We're also supporting a couple other initiatives through that process. So if you have any questions, you can ask me later. But yes, we are planning and trying to get around this as well as other agencies or unions throughout the
Great, thank you. All right, item G, board reports. Tim, or is Mary starting? Who's starting?
I'm gonna hand it directly over to Mary to kick it off, so we don't waste any more time.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So I'll do this in a second. I just learned that the link we sent you for the full report, you weren't able to access, so I apologize for that. We did print a couple of copies, but those aren't quite ready yet. And I did also print just the policies and priority considerations, which is just 2 pages, and those were kind of the questions that we thought you might be interested in talking about. Thank you. There should only be 2 copies there. But I am pleased to present to you the final study on microtransit. Here, it's been a pleasure to work with our consultants, Gary and Heidi and Ankit. I don't know if he is also in the room with you, Gary, as well as the project team here at WTA. I would say we've learned a lot, and there's a lot of data and a lot of numbers in that final report. If you have your spare time and want to look through that, the high level is on that 2-pager for you, and we're of course here to answer your questions that you have.
If I could just
Oh, yeah,
tee up
sorry. Yes.
that this is this was a study. We're not at any point of making any sort of recommendations or any of that. This is just to report back on the study, and then we can have a discussion on microtransit and so forth. But there's no recommendations from it from staff side.
Yes, thank you, Les, for that clarification. And then also for any members of the public that might be online, this is a presentation to the board. So we welcome the board of directors to ask questions either in the room or raise your hand if you're there virtually. If there are members of the public and you have questions about this, please follow up with me personally after the meeting, and I'd be happy to share this information with you. We will have the full report as well as the 2-page executive summary live on our Engage WTA site probably at 9:01 a.m. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heidi, who is one of our lead consultants on this team.
Great. Thank you, Mary, and good morning, board members. Do you have a question to start out with?
Yes, I think it'd be beneficial if you can describe what is your idea of microtransit. Like, is it that we tried something in Linden, we called it Linden Hop? Is it that a passenger van going around in certain areas? Or one of the things I've been talking about for several years is, why don't we duplicate Uber? Like, why can't a government make an app in local areas and have people participate in there? I don't want to take over this meeting, but like, what is the model you have based your study on, so that we, at least I have a clarity?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is in our presentation and in the report. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We will get to that shortly. Thank you for that question.
Oh.
All right, Heidi, and you should be able to share your screen, and if not, we can help you with that.
Yes, I can. I'm working on that right now. So because I don't think I can share this in Teams. Let me do this. Share.
Okay.
Okay. And great. And just as a quick, it is in the report. And really, when we talk about our analysis of microtransit, we're talking about an app-enabled system for booking and paying for shared rides. That's kind of the level of specificity that we are looking at when we were examining opportunities. So throughout the project, the consulting team worked closely with WTA staff to tailor the approach to our analysis, including the selection of the potential microtransit zone areas, the evaluation criteria that we were using to evaluate those zones, the selection of the operating models that we were going to examine, and the selection of the peer agencies to review. The final report includes really detailed information about all of those. But overall, these were really the key takeaways from the study, that it's a flexible, appealing service option for riders. It comes at a significant cost to the agency. So that, needing to establish a program, implementing microtransit is going to require, however the operating model is, it's going to require a program to address the programmatic needs of a new service. For all of the zones that we analyzed, it's going to cost significantly more to provide microtransit service than it currently costs to provide fixed route service, even when we looked at removing or reducing the fixed route service. And Gary will talk a little bit more about that analysis. And then given WTA's experience operating the Linden Hop and the other efficiency and performance benefits of in-house operations, the study is recommending that WTA operate future microtransit in-house. And we have further suggestions around how to do that. So overall, on-demand service it's more expensive than fixed route service, even for the underperforming routes that we examined as part of this study. Providing microtransit would provide the individuals in those areas with more premium service, but at a proportionally higher expense, and an expense that doesn't scale to reduce cost per trip as services become more popular, the same way that fixed route would. And just as a kind of reminder, I believe that the board saw this once before, but these were the 4 operating models that the project team was asked to examine. Between them, they reflect a pretty wide variety of different approaches. And between the all in-house and the contractor run, there's a lot of different hybrids. Every agency does it a little differently. So these 2 off to the side, the split call and control functions and the operational contractor, these are just some versions of hybrid operations. There are many, many more ways that agencies, almost as many ways as there are agencies, that folks will approach this. And we saw that through our experience as the consulting team, through the research, through the other studies that have been done, and in talking with the WTA peers that were identified. Several factors influence, why an agency might choose one of these models over another. So there's not one that is inherently better than the others. And our analysis for WTA cost was, one of the factors, but one of several factors. And so that's something that we'll talk about when we get into the evaluation. But we had one other consideration that, so we were asked to look at four operating models. These are the 4 that were chosen. As a project team, we had also presented this as a tool that's sometimes used by agencies for delivering trips to a specific group or for a specific trip purpose. This is common, especially when those trips would impact the productivity or the efficiency of the agency. And so this is another one that we kind of added on as a consideration and tried to identify some places where other agencies have done this and what their challenges and benefits have been from that. We can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like at the close of the presentation. So the recommendations that came out of the study were in-house operations, as I mentioned, but with trip scheduling and dispatch software that includes more robust microtransit features. So, when I noted that microtransit is app-enabled booking and payment, this is really the thing that makes some of the emerging microtransit modes different than what we've been doing since the 70s, is just that there's this background technology that is customer friendly and has the potential on the transit agency side to make more efficient routing decisions. Right now, there are lots of products on the market that allow the agency to set business rules that support your agency goals and help improve efficiency. And so making sure that the scheduling software that you're using has the full set of features that you need, particularly related to the recommendations that are in the report around some of the specific operating rules. For the zones, we'll go over the zones and their scoring, but in the recommendations for the study, we recommend exploring those 3 highest scoring zones in future microtransit planning. And you'll see that Linden is I think, number 3 in those top 3. And then kind of everything else that's scored below it there's a bit of a magnitude difference between those top 3 and the other zones. And so if you're going to move forward, continuing to look at microtransit, those are the zones that we would recommend starting with. And then the final set of recommendations was really, I'm sorry to say, more work for you. There are several places that this study was really focused on microtransit. And even though we looked at cost differences when we, to remove or reduce fixed route in those areas, this isn't an integrated holistic study of the family of services that you provide. And so the implications of service delivery on your staff, your budget with your riders, we really identified further policy and prioritization work that needs to happen at the agency level, particularly with respect to trade-offs that are kind of inherent in providing different kinds of service options across different geographies in your service area. And so I think we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation as well. And with that, I think I'm handing it over to Gary. Do you want me to keep running the slides for you, Gary?
Yeah, that would be great. I'll just tell you when to advance them.
Okay.
So the project team developed a series of goals and objectives to help identify areas in the WTA service area where microtransit may work. And these goals are developed to be consistent with some of the existing WTA goals and objectives, for example, from the Linden pilot project and also from the WTA 2040 long range plan. So initially 10 zones were identified and were screened down to 9 based on demographics and travel demand data. And the final 9 zones are shown on this map. You can see distributed throughout the county. And also, just as we get to a little further, they're numbered in order of how they scored. The zones analyzed have kind of very different operating environments. So they range from the Bellingham Waterfront District, which is very urban and has very short trips, to zones like the Everson Nooksack, Sumas, which is very rural with development patterns and longer trip length, very rural development patterns. And so based on these different varied service areas, we identified 2 zone typologies. And we used the route types that were in the recently approved fixed route evaluation guidelines. So we've developed what we call urban zones, and those are shown on the map here, 5, 6, and 8. And also rural small city zones, and those are the other 6 kind of on the outskirts of the service area. All right, next slide. All right, so the zones were evaluated using 6 metrics shown on the left side of the slide, which are derived from those project goals and objectives. The first looked at how much existing fixed route and ADA paratransit service is currently provided within each zone. And the zones with more existing service received a lower score. And this was done to meet the objective of enhancing mobility in areas not served well by transit. So we were looking to try to improve transit. Next, we looked at the number of new boardings by WTA priority populations. So this is a number of microtransit trips that we projected to be taken by low-income, minority, car-free, disabled, and senior individuals. The next metric was how well the zone was connected to the rest of the transit system. As this is a public transportation service, we wanted to make sure that the service was connected and people can make longer trips. And so zones connecting to more existing fixed route services received a higher score. We also looked at the total cost of transit services in the zone, both before and after the implementation of microtransit. And so this takes into consideration potential reductions to fixed route service or streamlining of routes, as well as the potential savings in ADA paratransit costs that could be made. The zones with the least percentage cost increase over existing service received a higher score. And in order to determine environmental benefits, we calculated the vehicle miles traveled reduced to each zone based on number of riders and the trip lengths. Last, we compared the cost per microtransit boarding in each zone with the cost receiving a higher score. On the right side of the slide, the zones are ranked based on overall score on a scale from 0 to 100. So, for example, if a zone received the highest score across all 6 of these, they would have received 100 points. on the scale. The highest ranked
Gary?
zone. Oh, yeah,
Gary,
go
can
ahead.
I ask a question? Were these 6 criteria equally weighted? Did you consider not equally weighting them?
Yeah, so the project team did weight them. We looked at equally weighting them, but then we ended up weighting them. I don't have the weightings in front of me right now. I could pull that up in a second here, but they were I think they were weighted a little bit differently, and I'll pull that up and I could bring that up in a second. So on the right, also, as I mentioned before, these are ranked from 1 to 9. So the highest ranked was Ferndale, with Blaine Birch Bay coming in second and Linden coming in third. All right, Heidi, next slide. Okay, so this slide provides some, excuse me, key statistics for each zone, which are, again, ordered by their overall score. The cost per boarding range from $34 to $55 per boarding. Excuse me. On the right side of the slide, you can see this places microtransit service costs right in between what the agency currently pays for fixed route, which is about $10 per boarding, and demand response, which is around $84 per boarding. So 34 to 55 is kind of right in the middle there. The number of peak vehicles per zone range from 1 in the lower demand zones to 6 in the Ferndale and Linden zones. So this would be like the highest number of vehicles needed during the peak on weekdays. Annual ridership ranges from 9,700 in the Lummi Nation zone to 6,700 in the Ferndale zone. Just for comparison, Route 232, which is one of WTA's GO lines, has an annual ridership of 376,000. And the existing Route 26 in the city of Linden has 70,000 annual boardings.
Can I ask a question about this slide? So what does the $14,084 per boarding cost mean compared to the stuff that's on the left of the slide where nothing is $84 per boarding?
Can you repeat that the first part of that? You said
if I look on the left slide going down for each of those zones, they're ranging from $30 to $50 cost per boarding for demand response. And then on the right side, there's that $84.03. So how does that mesh?
Yeah, so that would be for your existing ADA paratransit service. So that's the service that you guys provide for people who can't ride the fixed route service. So that's like kind of like the highest cost service you guys are providing right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, is it possible for you to turn up your volume? We're having a hard time hearing you clearly.
Hold on one second. Let me see if I can.
But you can hear online, perfect.
While we're waiting, the weighting is shown on page 83 of the full report. The 2 highest weighted factors are new transit rides for priority populations. I call that an equity score. And the second highest weighting was cost per boardings, sort of a cost efficiency score.
All right, so I'm going to speak more directly. Does that sound better? You guys hear me better in the conference room?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So, all right, I think we're on the next slide now, Heidi. Okay, so this slide highlights the project resource requirements for each zone measured in revenue hours and annual cost. The column on the right shows the current cost of transit service in each zone. And in all cases, the total cost of transit service after implementing microtransit would exceed the cost of existing transit services. The new zones range in annual cost from $514,000 to $2 million. And again, for comparison, the Route 232 that we discussed on the last slide has an annual operating cost of $3.2 million, and Route 26 has an annual cost of $1.5 million. So just to make the point here that implementing any of these zones would be kind of a major investment similar to adding a new bus route to the WTA system. And unless I could take questions here, I would pass it back to Tim.
Gary, can you speak to the Seth Paul's initial question about user side subsidies, can you talk about the benefits, costs, implications of that kind of service?
Yeah, and I can have Mary help out also, but yeah, so that's we did look at that as one of the options. And I think there's some unique things up in this area in regards to that. The market is we've been talking about is not as robust. The response time for the TNCs, though bringing in additional resources could change that. There's a lot of also I would say requirements that go along with that. If you provide that kind of service, you also still have to provide accessible vehicles in addition to that. So either WTA would have to provide those or a third party provider. But let me pass it back to Heidi. I think she can go into a little more detail.
Jared, can you just, for the acronym TNC?
Oh, Transportation Network Company. So that would be like Uber and Lyft.
Thank you.
Yeah, we included a little more information about this in the report as well. Basically, as Gary mentioned, there's going to be some compliance concerns around ADA, driver training, alcohol and drug testing, things like that. That with any contractor, you need to look into that. But particularly if you're providing a user side subsidy and you don't have that direct contract and relationship with the agencies, then making sure that you're still in compliance for those. A lot of times the ways that agencies will use these, as I mentioned, is for really specific trips, for specific individuals, specific kinds of trips, oftentimes in coordination with another partner in the community, healthcare, adult day centers. And because it's specific, a lot of times what the agency is trying to do is reduce the cost of that, because it is a premium service, like a door-to-door taxi service, essentially. It's usually popular with riders and expensive for the agency. So to reduce the cost on the agency side, there's a lot of different ways that agencies will approach it. They'll say, you have a cap on how many trips you can take a week, a month, or we only subsidize $5 of it, or we subsidize half of it, or we put $50 into your account when you put $50 in. There's kind of a wide range of ways that these contracts are set up. The most robust user side subsidy program happening in the US is in Harris County, Texas. It's where Galveston is located. And that is limited to seniors and people with disabilities. And they do a match for the account, basically. So, and the performance data we have from that is from 2019. So that one of the things that we have in the report is, there are certain things that if WTA is really interested in going down that path, it's probably worth reaching out and talking to some other peers really specifically about that. The peer agencies that we reviewed are not using user side subsidies right now. But I mean, the main characteristic of it is it's the transit agency subsidizing rider use of private providers. And then, the transit agency might benefit from having reduced capital and staffing costs. And you can set those subsidy caps or you can require eligibility requirements, things like that. But, as with microtransit in general, it doesn't scale. So it's a useful way to cover trips that may otherwise be really unproductive for the agency or inefficient for the agency. But as it becomes more popular, then the agency bumps up against the costs or the reduced customer service. And this has, consistently, we've seen these programs change over time. They start one way and then they change to have a lower cap, fewer trips, longer wait time for customers. And so it kind of degrades the premium level of the service as it becomes more costly.
Michael?
Oh, what was I gonna say? Sorry, a couple observations. One, I mean, I'm really looking at the cost of this. Uber has lost over $30 billion. It's been losing more than $1 billion each and every year. It turned a profit for the first time, I think, last year. I think that the use of the word premium profit is really accurate. This stuff can be more expensive than Uber can afford and maybe more expensive than we can afford. So here's my question. All these numbers don't look great, even for the 3 best areas. Can you tell me what the community would look like that would produce better numbers? What would a better kind of scenario or community or topography or demography look like that would bring the cost for boarding down to $25 instead of $35, $45, $55? How might Whatcom County be different so that there was maybe an even more attractive microtransit opportunity?
I mean,
Oh,
yeah.
do you want to go ahead?
I'll give one example, and then Gary, I would love for you to jump in. I mean, where we've seen microtransit is almost always more expensive than even underperforming routes, even routes that are, you know, operating at 10 or fewer passengers an hour. But where the research has shown that it's more successful is often when it represents something that's a lot closer to deviated fixed route than true on demand, where the business rules group people, make them walk a little further to shared stops, starts to look a lot like fixed route. And that's places where they get higher productivity, because the productivity is one of the main issues, right? When you have one driver serving one trip, very few of these trips end up being shared. You're just going to have low productivity. You're going to have a high cost per trip. So the more they can group the trips, then the better the cost per ride is. But that often means not giving people door-to-door service. It means having these shared points, virtual bus stops, points of interest that they have to travel between. And that can help, but it's still often not as cost effective as fixed route.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple thoughts here. One is that we do work with agencies that have very, very low productivity fixed route that is at or below. So microtransit can carry typically three boardings per hour per vehicle. And that's just kind of the limitation of picking up and dropping off people at disparate locations. And usually agencies have fixed route boarding standards that are like 10, 15, 20. I don't know yours off the top of your head. Tim could throw that in at some point. But and so those services don't really exist here. And so I would say in areas that are new, if you were to pick a part of your service area that you were to want to provide service to you that you don't currently provide service, microtransit would be a good way. But you guys have taken out a lot of the low productivity trips already from your system and the routes, and you may have had routes that were discontinued in the past that didn't do well. So I would say that's then to Mary's point, yeah, a lot of people going. So it's like rail feeder is commuter rail to like office parks. I've seen that do well on a kind of a per, you know, a train comes in and, you know, 5 to 10 people end up going to the same, you know, office park or something like that. So those kind of work well. So I would say that you know, the system is pretty efficient right now, and there's not a lot of you know places where you're not running like, you know, 20-minute service in an area that you know you've already pared it back to, let's say, hourly or just a couple trips a day, like in some of these rural areas. If they had like half an hour bus service, then microtransit might be a good option, but that service is already at kind of the right levels.
That Paul?
Yes, I had a different assumption in my mind. I think the biggest cost is the vehicles and the drivers. You are assuming that they will be the agency employees, and agency will provide all the cars. And this is not meant for to replace the paratransit. It is just for people who want to go shopping, gonna go to doctors, or want to go to town, do other stuff, but not paratransit. So what I had in my mind was that why can't we write a app just like Uber and have people from the community who are gone through the process of drug testing, everything, who would like to moonlight and do this in addition to somebody wants to do it all day. and use that model where there is no cost of the vehicle and there is no cost of the driver, or very minimal cost, as a minimal, okay, we're going to give you X dollars a day or something, or per hour, and the rest is you're going to collect the money. Of course, we know that if the government has to provide the vehicles and the number of drivers and everything, it will always be very expensive. So I don't know. Is that even possible? But that's what my basic assumption was. Let it run by not having vehicles on the agency's dollar and not having drivers on the agency.
I mean, at that point, wouldn't we just be subsidizing Uber?
No, no, it would be for people who need transit. That's another thing what we try to do, that since it's the tax dollars, anybody and everybody should be allowed. So they will be saying that we will be competing with Uber, but this should be the transit services for people who do not have cars, who are not able to do that, or that qualify them and give them that qualifying thing that they are the ones who are using it. Same thing we do with, we do not offer paratransit. We have to qualify a person to be eligible to call for paratransit. I think there could be a system. We are trying to help the people who do not have the ability to transit themselves for their daily needs. We're not providing a universal service to anybody who wants to flag a hand and get a Uber. So I think we have to start thinking differently. This will never make money or never be affordable. If we have to buy 500 cars and 500 extra drivers, how would it make it?
Michael?
So I'm trying to figure out what makes financial as well as mission sense. I'm thinking about the subsidy model, because it can be scaled and it can be targeted to eligible populations. And the only service to which these microtransit costs are cost competitive is when you compare it to paratransit. And again, paratransit is kind of a targeted service with eligibility. So maybe that's the way to think about it. Think about it as a viable option which might be targeted like paratransit, but have a lower threshold of participation. In other words, you don't need to be truly disabled, but you might need to be a priority population, or a person in need, or a person removed from opportunities otherwise. But it's the only thing to which it appears favorable is compared to paratransit rather than fixed route. So I think we need to compare it to like paratransit type populations to serve rather than fixed route type populations to serve. I don't know, is that making sense?
How would you define eligibility?
Income and age. And right now we do disabilities, and that's the primary thing. What if you were able-bodied but elderly, able-bodied but low income and needed access to employment? Those are still priority populations.
We'd have to talk about what does that look like alongside our other services. So with fixed route, the general population, paratransit for those people who can't ride the fixed route system, right, for whatever reason. And this would be a third service, right? And where does that fit amongst those other services? I think that's a policy discussion. Where does it fit? Does it fill in gaps in those areas that we currently serve? Does it get implemented in a new area or a different area? Because I think what you're suggesting is keep our existing services, but this is an additional service on top of those other services, is what I'm hearing.
Well, it can't compete with fixed routes, so don't try. So where is fixed route underserving priority populations?
Outside of Belleville.
And you will still
Yeah.
provide, you will still need to provide ADA equivalency. So that's something to keep in mind, is that even if in your eligible population, I'm sorry?
Then it gets paratransit-like, and maybe the costs go up if we have to do ADA equivalency.
To your, what,
Yes.
or,
So
sorry,
then
do
it's
you
not
want
even competitive to paratransit, or maybe we're not, it's equivalent to paratransit.
I was going to respond to your point, Michael, really quickly that I think I mentioned this in the last update that I gave the board. There is, forget which county they're in, but there is one microtransit service that is specifically serving people who are in recovery. So it's only eligible for people who are living at like halfway houses and other places like that are in recovery and need to go to medical appointments or educational opportunities or employment opportunities. And so that's one example of what, similar to what you mentioned about like just one population that is being served for a very specific need that really lifts them up and then alongside lifts up the community as well, you know, kind of downstream effects. So there are other options like that that I can, you know, do a little bit more research on and share with the board too.
I would also just wonder, so we have, I mean, I hear that we keep talking about, we have fixed route and paratransit, but we also have zone service. And so I'm wondering if maybe for our agency, I mean, maybe it makes sense to explore redefining how we do zone service and maybe trying to integrate, you know, look at an approach of like, hey, how does, you know, maybe we run zone service more often, and maybe that gets to the certain people. And, you know, right now we utilize paratransit vehicles in some instances of going out to the zones. But I don't know, maybe looking at that as a way to kind of do some of this, but maybe it doesn't come as a high cost as providing exclusive, like what this microtransit is. So I don't know, just an option that I was hearing and go around, just throwing stuff out.
At the risk of overstepping my bounds, it's 9:10. What just maybe to wrap up this discussion, because it obviously continue. This is, I think, a good foundational discussion as we move next month on the 17th into a discussion that will continue into next year about service allocation and how do we want to look at what our goals are and how we allocate our resources across the system writ large, and how we invest those dollars to come up with goals. And then that hopefully helps us figure out, okay, how do we want to invest these dollars and what kinds of service to meet what kind of goals. So starting on the 17th, we'll have discussions on that, more of kind of a foundational thing, and then move into probably December and then into next year to start talking about those things that can then guide us as we're trying to talk about how do we invest in service and those things. What are the goals we're trying to achieve with that as a system, not just as a route, but in addition to how does that affect the whole system, and what's our allocation of that, or what's our philosophy on that allocation of resources. So this is a great example, I think, to move that discussion forward.
All right. Thank you very much. This was good. Any other business? Announcements? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.